Welcome back to part 2 of our series where we are discussing how to take our VBA macro modules, whatever you want to call them, and how we can take the content inside of those projects and upload them to GitHub using the GitHub API, all from within VBA. So in our previous video, we discussed a little bit about just how do we get started with making sure that we can access the API, or how do we get started in the sense of making sure that we can easily grab the content in a specific component that exists in a specific project. And now that we've kind of talked a little bit about that, we've got the code ready to go, we kind of understand a little bit about what we had to do and why we had to do it, we're going to take just a few minutes to go over the GitHub API just a tiny bit. I'm not planning to go into too much detail, only because at some point we will be covering this particular API. However, it is important to know just a few things before we get started. So the first thing I would pretty much recommend anyone to do who is planning to interact with the API is go read the documentation. It kind of goes without saying. And then from here, for our particular project, we have to access something that belongs to our repos, right? And so when you go into the GitHub documentation, you'll notice here they have an overview section, and then they have this reference section, right? And so the reference section is really the different types of objects, if that's how you kind of want to think about it, that you can interact with through the API. Now, each of these objects have different functionality associated to them, right? So for example, if I go down here to the repositories reference and I click it, I will see all the things I can do with repositories, right? I can also look at some other objects that exist inside of a repository, right? So in this case, I can see the collaborators that would exist in a repository. I can see the branches that would exist inside of a repository. I can see the commits, the content. So basically, you can think as your repository as kind of your high-level hierarchy within the bigger object model of the GitHub API, and then you kind of just start going down the hierarchy. So in our particular situation, we want to work with the content that is inside of our repository. So if I scroll down a little bit, you'll notice that I have this little content section. So if I click this, I will then see the different things I can do with content inside of my repository. And so you can get repository content. So I can actually get the content of a file. I can do things related to, if I go down here, create or update files. And then if you actually, just so I don't take too long, you can see I can delete, I can list commit comments, and I can create a commit comment. So each of these kind of have their own little different requests that you have to build, but GitHub makes it easy, right? So if you just go to the section that's important to you, so in this case, we're creating or updating a file, I can see that I need to use a put request. So I need to use a put request in order to leverage this functionality. And the endpoint is the repos endpoint. I have to specify the owner of that repo, and then I need to specify the repo name. And then I need to specify the contents endpoint within that repo, and then the path of the content. Now, I'll explain a little bit about what this is in a second, but at this point, you can actually leverage most of what you need to inside of the repo. So to give you an idea of just what it would look like, I actually have some code here, and we can take a little bit and see what's inside of it. So for example, if I do a read 1192, oh, hold on. What happened? Did I put the wrong one as owners? Oh, repos, owner, repo. Sigma YouTube. I think that's the one. Oh, there's always something. There we go. Those forward slashes, I'm telling you, man. So now you can see the repos that, well, basically the Sigma coding repo that specifically belongs to me. Now, each one of these has 10 different endpoints you can go into and all sorts of stuff like that. But the important part is we just basically have to build the URL that is required for the specific operation that we want to do. And then from there, what we can do is then go a little bit further and adjust it. So it's pretty straightforward for the most part, but it can get a little bit confusing depending on what type of operation you're doing. So what we're going to do next is we're going to build the components necessary to build the path that redirects us to that particular one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define our URL components. In this case, we're going to say base URL equals https://api.github.com. In this case, I want the repos endpoint, and I need to make sure there's a / at the end. And then I'm going to define my repo name. In this case, I want it to be Sigma Coding YouTube. And then from here, I need it to be my username. In this case, it's just aread1192. So basically just your GitHub username that anyone can see, right? So we got that one. And then I need to define a couple other things. So the next one is the file name. So in this case, it's going to be test.vb. And then from here, we need to do the access token. So the access token is important because this is what will allow us to authenticate with the API. So we actually pulled that in the previous video, so I'm just going to grab that again. And then what's going on? Why can't I grab it? Oh, there we go. And I'm going to put that right there. And then from here, we're going to build the full URL. So build the full URL, and that's just going to be full URL equals the base URL plus the username plus the repo name plus the contents portion plus the file name. And then at the end of it, it's really important that you do a question mark. Where is it? Question mark, reference master. Now there's technically another way you can do this when you build your request, just to, again, high level. I can actually specify the branch in my message, but for the time being, I'm just gonna keep it simple and we'll just do it like that. But just keep in mind that it is possible to do it just like that as well. In fact, kind of just to show you something, I'll show you kind of what it would look like inside of it. Okay, so if I go back to my repo, I actually ran it that time. I don't know if anyone really noticed it, but you can see it now. And then we're going to go here. And then you can see I put in a little file in here. So that's also specifying how we can use the path as well too. So just want to make sure we're kind of demonstrating what we can do. There's different ways to build it. You can either put it in the URL, you could put it not in the URL. It really just depends. In this situation, just because it's pretty straightforward, we're just going to do nothing too crazy. All right, so then we're going to build the full URL, and then we're going to start building the components. We're going to basically open a new request. So open a new request, and then from here, it's going to be XML object equals, XML object open. Wait, did I do the XML object? Oh no, I didn't. That wouldn't have worked. That's what I was looking. I was like, wait a minute, I don't think I did. So first we need to define our XML object. And so we're going to say set XML object equal to a new MSXML2 XML HTTP 60. So just like that. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Okay, so then we're gonna open a new request, and then from here it's gonna be b string method. In this case, it's gonna be a put request, and then we're gonna have b string URL. I want to make sure I spell it right. That's gonna equal the full URL, and then variable async is going to be equal to true. This is for async requests. So this one you need to make sure is on, because sometimes it won't happen necessarily right away. So you just want to make sure this is set to true, because if you don't, then it actually won't go through, which is always good, right? Okay, and then from here, we need to set some of our headers. So when we make a request, we need to make sure we set our headers. This is our opportunity to define our access token, and then also what type of content that the API should be expecting. So in this case, we're going to say XML object equals, or sorry, XML object set request header, b string header. This is going to be the key, basically. In this case, what kind of content are we accepting? And then I think I'm going to copy this one just because I don't want to misspell it. And then we'll talk a little, I'll just copy this one and then we'll talk a little bit through it, because I have a reputation for misspelling things. Okay, so here we have the accept key, and then we're going to say we're going to expect JSON content. So we're going to send along JSON content inside of our request. So it does expect JSON. You cannot have XML or anything like that. So that's actually one of the bigger challenges with this whole process is you have to use JSON, and we all know that working with JSON in VBA can be a little bit challenging. There's workarounds with it, obviously, but it's not super intuitive. So this is going to specify the content that we're going to be sending, and then we're going to specify the authorization. This is used for authentication purposes. We want to make sure we have token, space, make sure there's a space, and then the access token that we defined up here. Okay? And then once you've done that, we can move on to the next component, which is defining the payload. So we're going to define the payload, and from here, it will be payload equals, and then it's going to be squirrely brackets, double quotes, message, and then what is it? This. Yeah, this is my message. And then from here, it's going to be content. And then triple quotes. Again, I know it's confusing. And then we're going to concatenate on the next portion. I'll be honest, this is just one of those things where I found that it's just easier to concatenate it on, because if you don't, it becomes a big thing. We're going to also remove, and we're just going to clean our content using the clean function. This just removes any weird characters that potentially could have been left behind. Again, because we're doing this from VBA, we're kind of limited on what we can do, but this, ideally, from what I have found, takes care of most of the issues that I've seen when it comes to just these weird characters that technically shouldn't be there, but then they're sent along, and then you get these weird errors that you didn't expect to get. So I just used the application.clean function just to remove all those weird characters, and then send it along in our request. And then from here, it's going to be our last squirrely bracket, and then that. Now, some of you might be asking, how did I know? How did I know this was supposed to be it? Well, lucky for you, remember we have our documentation wherever we're confused. If you look at the create or update files content, you will see all the parameters that need to be specified. So this is saying what it is going to accept. So this is telling you where that parameter is and the type of that parameter. So in this case, the accept parameter is in the headers portion, and basically they just tell you what it should be. And then finally, they'll tell you some other things like, okay, well, these are some parameters, but they're in the path. So the URL path. So owner, That's in the path. These are in the body. You can see here we have a message. Note here that they say it's required, so you have to specify it. You have to specify it. If you're updating content, you need the SHA, so basically the blob SHA of the file being replaced. Basically, that's the last commit message, or the last commit ID. That's, again, for a different topic. And then additionally, you can see there's some other stuff like committer, branch. So these are not required, but it's optional. And then again, just specifying what we did up above. If you specify branch master, then you don't need to do it in the property path. And then they also show you that, hey, for example, if you want to use the author object, right? So if you want to specify the author, then you can specify the name in the email as well. So this is actually part of the committer object. So you see how here it's an object. That object contains author. That's another object. That object has these properties. So again, it's very much like a hierarchy when you're thinking about it. And then they also give you some examples, right? So they have a shell command and then JavaScript. They don't have Python, unfortunately, but that's okay, because all we really need is here. So really, at its most basic form, you need a message and you need content. And that is simply to create a non-existing file. That is not to update an existing file. That is to create a non-existing file. So we have a message and we have the content. And that's basically what I'm doing here. I'm just building that payload that is necessary. I just have to do it a roundabout way because we're doing it all from VBA. Now, from here, I kind of give you an idea of what it looks like if you want to see it. So I'll be putting that there as well. And then from here, we can start making the request, right? So now we can send the request. And what we're going to do is we're going to say XML object send, and then var body. The variable body is going to be the payload. And then we have to make sure we wait until the request is finished. So wait till it is finished. We're going to say while XML object ready state does not equal 4. I'm going to move my notes. And then we're going to say do events. And I didn't know this was a thing, wend. I did not know wend was a word that you could use in VBA, but I was very impressed when I saw it. I said, that is a very odd way of doing it, but okay. And then we're just going to print out some info so we can see it. I'm always big about printing out stuff. So debug print is the full URL. And then from here, it's going to be plus the full URL. And then we're going to have debug print. And then we're going to have the status text. This is going to be XML object status text. And then finally, we're going to have the payload is going to be the payload. Shocking, right? And that's really about it. So let's see what happens. I'm going to check to, where is it? Make sure it compiles. And then we'll run it and see what happens. Okay, so looks like everything went okay. So I should be able to go here and see the contents. That's at least from the URL perspective, and then we'll see it from the other one. So this is good. I'm liking what I'm seeing right now. It looks like everything went through, but I want to make sure I see it in here. So if I reload it again, I now see that my file is in here, and it looks just like it was inside of my personal macro workbook. So all in all, I'm very happy with this. It looks like everything went through. I'll be honest, while you can do it in VBA, it's probably better to do it in another language. We've seen with Python, we have access to the Win32com library, so that would technically give us the capability to do this. But I do like showing different ways of doing things just because I think it can be helpful. And I think at the same time, sometimes what we learn from here, we can use in other different places. So overall, that's pretty much the video. So if you have any final questions about how to utilize the GitHub API in this specific manner, by all means, put them down in the comments below, and I will do my best to get back to you. But hopefully this will also be a nice way for those of you who have a GitHub repo and would like to save all your content there. Now you can do it. And now you can ideally make your life 10 times easier. That's the plan, at least. So thank you again for watching, everybody. We'll see you in our next series.